afternoon and welcome to our City Council workshop meeting, and this is August 3rd at 3 o'clock. We'd like to begin the meeting by just going over our YouTube presentation for these meetings. The Gulf Breeze City Council will hold a budget workshop via Communications Media Technology as authorized by Governor DeSantis, Executive Order 2-69 and extended by Executive Order 20-179. The budget workshop will be broadcast today at 3, Monday, August 3rd via YouTube Live. The City Council, along with key staff, will attend in person and public participation via YouTube Live and call in to the following toll-free number 1-888-585-9008, conference room ID number 186-319-955. And at this time, I'll ask our city attorney to go over this for all of us.
So on April 6, 2020, the City Council adopted these procedures for using communications media technology as provided by Section 120-54, paragraph 5B2 Florida statutes and as authorized by the Governor's executive orders. This meeting is being streamed on YouTube Live and on the city's Facebook page. The agenda and backup material in the agenda packet are posted on the city's website. Members of the public wanting to participate in the meeting were asked in the posted meeting notice to submit their questions or comments on agenda items with their name and address and a reference to the agenda item on which they wish to comment by email to the city clerk at cityclerks@gulfbreezeflorida.gov or by regular mail to the city clerk's attention at the City of Gulf Breeze, City Hall, 1070 Shoreline Drive, Gulf Breeze, Florida 32561. All written comments for this meeting, which is the budget workshop, had to be received by 1 p.m. Central Standard Time today, August 3, 2020. Anyone who wants to comment on an item or participate in the public forum at the end of the meeting can call into the following toll-free number, 1-888-585-9008, call code 186-319955. Hold and your call will be answered in turn. Comments on agenda items and in the public forum may also be made via the chat box on YouTube Live. The standard meeting rules continue to apply. Comments are limited to 3 minutes and must be applicable to the agenda topic being considered or made during the public forum.
All right, thank you. Leslie, would you please call roll?
Yes, ma'am. Councilman Slater?
Here.
Councilman Abear? Councilman Torgerson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Milne?
Here.
And Mayor Fitch.
Here. At this time, we will just begin with our discussion item for today, which is the fiscal year 2021 budget workshop, and this is our second budget regarding this. Samantha?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into your performance-oriented business-like funds. Those are your enterprise funds and then also some special funds. I'm going to start first by just going through your materials with you so that as Jason... I'm going to start first... Sorry. I'm going to share with you a secret. I can't stand the sound of my own voice. So if that happens all night, it's going to be a short meeting. I'm sorry that y'all have to listen to the sound of my voice. Thank you. So I'm going to go through these materials first just so that you can reference back to them as Jason is talking and you can jot down questions that you have. But first in front of you is the budget summary. This, of course, is a tentative budget summary, but is representative of what you will be adopting in September. So this is reflective of the proposed budget and the discussions we've had most significantly to date. And so you'll recognize this from the notice that is printed in the paper every year. This is what will be on our website. And you see at the top that the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021, which starts October 1, is 15.3% less than the prior year. We've had some great questions from individual council members between the last budget workshop and this one, and one of those questions came from Councilman Torgerson, which is, well, if you remove the capital and you remove the internal transfers, what then is the difference in the overall budget? And so Jean, if you look on this far right margin, she just put together a summary for you that simply shows that fiscal year 2020, you approved a $38.2 million budget about. And what is being proposed for this year, that 15% reduced number, is that $32,384,619 figure. But when you remove the capital and transfers from last year, what you see is a budget that was representative of about 24 million, and the budget this year is representative of about 25 million. Now again, that's when you remove capital and internal transfers. And so when you look at it that way, it is a 5% increase in the size of the overall budget this year. And so you see Jean's notations here that is because the paving in your streets fund has increased, the South Santa Rosa utility contractual and professional services has increased, and in your CRA for underground and utilities and your multimodal projects, the professional services and contracts have increased. So that's the reason why you see any increase at all for your operating expenses as proposed for next year compared to this current year. Just want to bring that to your attention, and then if you have any questions on this as we're talking this evening. And then I also want to bring your attention to this. This is a great cheat sheet that Jean put together for me, and it's just bottom line what we're here to talk about today. And so at the top you have the funds that Jason is going to be reviewing with you, and you can see the unrestricted cash projected for year end. And you can see that this is what we struggle with every year when we talk about whether the general fund needs to subsidize some of these enterprise accounts for major capital projects. It is because even though we have cash flow, it is significantly restricted. And this is why we try so hard to educate our citizens about the difference between restricted money and unrestricted money. Just because we have a growing enterprise, that money may be restricted in how it can be used. And so when you look below that line of restricted cash, Jean's also broken out, the reasons why, whether it's for debt service or it's for customer, deposits that may have to be returned, or it's restricted due to state law because it's a TAP or impact fee reserve. And so for each one of these funds, this is the same challenge that you reviewed last year during budget workshops, when we knew that we were having an issue with cash flow. And so you adopted a very austere budget last year, and you also engaged Reptelis consultants with looking at the needs of your water and sewer funds so that you can best plan for the next 10 years. So this is a cheat sheet for you. If you have any questions about that, please ask me now. But you also see the yellow highlight. The one thing I just want to point out is that this is based on when, Jean created it for me, but these numbers are constantly changing, especially as it relates to Tiger Point. And so it's a projection, it's our best guess. But, right now the course is being heavily used. And so, we'll talk about that later this evening, but it's a projection of the subsidy which may be needed for that asset by the end of the year. And so you can also see the projection for next year as well. And that is, again, if it were continued to be an asset for 12 months. So I just wanted to bring those two kind of cheat sheets to your attention so you can refer back to them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. We're going to be talking about the Streets and Stormwater Fund, the Natural Gas Fund, Solid Waste Fund, City Water and Sewer Fund, the South Santa Rosa Utility Water and Sewer Fund, and Tiger Point. As it relates to both stormwater and the city water and sewer, there are some things that we want to take a deeper dive and get your general agreement so that we can get some direction in how to proceed. So as we're talking about time management, because you do have a regular meeting at 5:30, just know we kind of expect to really drill down as we get to the latter part of the stormwater presentation and also in the streets portion as well. So, Jean, did I leave anything out before we turn it over? Okay, all right.
So, I just had a quick question.
Yes.
On the budget summary.
Yes.
I appreciate y'all doing that. With the 5.5 or the 5% net change, I assume this is reflective of the balance sheet where the expenses are lined up with the revenue?
Yes.
It's
Okay.
income and expense statement.
Right, okay. Any of the revenue, is that from new debt or anything like that, or is it all from?
Any of the revenue or
Yeah,
the,
the revenue side.
um,
I mean, are we taking on loan proceeds to balance out to the expenses is what I'm asking?
No.
Okay.
No,
No.
we would, and we would never.
no, we have to keep it on hand, so it's available, but we don't draw it down.
Okay.
Yes.
So we always make sure we have the reserve that we're required to have.
Yes, but we would not ever use loan proceeds for operating expenses, and I mean that just as a best business practice. Jean and I are both very committed to that, and so thank you for the question. But we would, and we certainly, as you've looked at your cash positions, we're not in any type of such a disastrous situation that we would ever even ponder such a thing. So we talk a lot about using our recurring revenues for recurring expenses. Okay.
Thank you.
But thank you for that question too. All right, with that, Jason, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, let's go to the org chart. That's the third or fourth slide. Just to give you a quick overview of our Public Services Department, and it's made up of 3 divisions. Development Services, managed by Thomas Lambert. They do all the major project planning and project management, which has been a lot of projects this year. They're doing a great job, but they also do technical support and other type of support for all the other divisions. For the water and sewer and wastewater treatment facility operations, that's Janae Rivera. She's the utility manager. And then for natural gas, streets and stormwater, solid waste, utility billing, Sam Wilson. He's our public services manager. So, Public Services Department, we are also taking in the utility billing staff management with just the 25% growth in customer growth. It's just become more of a management focus to have more synergy between operations and public service. And so we're folding that in under Sam Wilson's division. He's also responsible for Fund 201, streets and stormwater, natural gas, solid waste, and transportation. And water and sewer services is water and sewer. Also includes the, it's inside and outside the city, also includes the wastewater plant, reclaim service. There's a little chart about the Public Services Department again. So Joanne Oliver, she's the utility billing supervisor, will be reporting to Sam. And already they're working on a transition plan, it's working out very well. And there's just some functions of the utility billing and customer service department. They get calls, as you can imagine, with just about everything. But they are a direct line when people call in with questions, whether it has to do with their recycle containers, trash cans, water and sewer services, whole 9 yards. Gives you a little shot of the different tasks that they do.
Jason, let's pause on this for a minute, just in case Jean has anything that she'd
Okay.
like to, for the prior year, highlight for the council.
I just want to mention Joanne Oliver and her staff do a really good job of keeping track of their statistics. So this statistical data is something that they keep up with every day. So they count the number of phone calls, they count the number of people who come to the window, they count how many mail payments they received. And some of the data we can pull from our work order system and from utility billing. But we are gonna transition that from under my supervision to public services because it makes more sense for the customer relations aspect of it, because a lot of times we're having to coordinate. I will still be involved in the utility billing aspect of it for reconciling and accounting functions, but other than that, these ladies and gentlemen do a really great job, so how about that?
Good.
As we go to the next slide on the 2020 financial performance, another thing I just want to point out is the turnover that we've had with our customer service in the past. We, prior to the last 2.5, really 3 years, we utilized primarily temps for customer service. And that meant a lot of training. There was a lot of turnover, and it really hampered the customer service experience. It's hard to kind of develop that relationship as a resident with the person you're paying your customer, your utility bill to, when it's constantly changing. And so the turnover is much, much improved. And now, we're hearing, those relationships growing. We're hearing those compliments from the residents. And so you do see that reflective in the financial performance, but apples, to apples, the professional services, contractual portion has gone down significantly over the last 3 years, and then we're seeing a stabilizing in the salaries because we're not having to deal with the turnover that we've had in the past.
And they all go to one of Jason's departments anyway, so when they leave the utility billing office, we've had 2 staff who have moved over into utility services and other functions, so it kind of makes sense. It's real cohesive, and then they're able to go to another area and help out. So we've had one move to gas, and then one has moved to SSRUS with Janae. So
One thing, and this is like back a second, when I was looking at your front window calls and the analysis of that, if I did the math, which would be questionable, but it looks like about 84 calls a day are transferred to other departments. And I guess it just made me wonder if there's a way to do our phone system or something where they could get to who they need to sooner, and that would just save a lot of time,
Yeah.
on the phone for them. So.
That is in beta testing right now, is what I have been calling it with COVID. And so Ed Miller has now set up where if someone calls, they can punch that number and immediately go to the department they want to go to. I had reservations and did not institute that earlier for the same reason that the prior city manager didn't, and that was during the recession. That centralized automated call system became very popular back in like 2007 and 2008. And then we went away from it because as it relates to like that level of service, your residents really want to talk to a live person. And so as we've been minimally manned, I have softened on that position, and we've been real curious to see what the residents' response is, and it may be credit to the system we're using that you don't have to wait through a long automated message, but thus far I haven't heard any complaints. So I think that it is working, but we're using COVID to test that, and then hopefully that should lessen the burden on the front counter. And you can see Ed and Jeannie both going, yes.
Okay.
So yes,
All
good,
right.
great question. It's been a discussion for some time.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. So those are the numbers, fiscal year 20 budget numbers and what's projected. And the difference there's going to be somewhat of a surplus just because
Minimally
staffing.
manned, yeah.
staff
really-
move to other areas of public service.
It's similar to our other departments where we're not fully staffed all the time as much as we want to be. So for next year, we're requesting a budget total of $422,105, and that's basically slightly higher than what was requested last year, just reflective of a 4% raise for staff and just inflationary cost and professional services. No major surprises there. Any questions before we go on to streets and stormwater?
Are there any other technologies that we can use to help minimize the need for additional staff?
We're looking at a optical character reader lockbox system right now with the bank, which would allow us to just get a bank file to post payments instead of a person sitting there doing that. We're in the process right now of getting a quote on that. So we were leaving a position vacant because we may not need it if we can get that going. So we've been looking at that, and then we've also been looking at some different credit card payment options. So if we can get the deal going with the bank, it would eliminate a half-time. We have a person who sits there all day long, half a day, just processing checks.
Good.
So,
Yeah, that'd be great.
So in the streets and stormwater department, that's under public services. Next slide. So in fiscal year 2020, on the books, it would show that we've had 16 positions partially funded by streets and drainage. That's because we had the folks in the gas department, part of their time and pay allocation was in streets, and it was kind of all over the board. And so this year, we've re-looked at everything, how we're doing the managing and the tasking of staff, and what we're doing now, we've kind of evolved is having all of our gas staff focusing on gas installs and gas maintenance, and then we'll have separate the streets and drainage staff. And as you all authorize the cancellation of the Department of Corrections work crew, in place of that, we've hired full-time streets and drainage service workers, and and that's really made us realign the staffing allocations and how we want to do everything there. So rather than having where it doesn't make sense, where there's allocations coming out of different departments where that person's not going to really be working in, we're narrowing down and putting allocations where they need to be. And so right now we have 3.5 dedicated full-time service workers inside the city. And that includes 1 part-time streets and drainage tech, but again, they're still funded out of gas. But what we're requesting is to convert that to a full-time, and where we'll have 4 total full-time staff focused on streets and drainage and stormwater maintenance.
So then, Jason, previously you had about 12 people or so who were just had different amounts of time in different departments that you were doing.
Well, in reality, starting out in October 1st of fiscal year 20, we had 1 service worker who was we had him just be the inside the city maintenance guy. And then everybody else was just in the gas department. They're certified to work in gas. They've got all the licenses and everything. And if there was a big project, we would pull 1 or 2 guys from there to help. But with the way our gas franchise is growing, especially in the residential area, we can't keep up with all the connection demands we have. And with our new staff that we have in our department, they bring with them a lot of experience in local government, like Sam Wilson. He was worked for Fort Walton Beach for over 10 years, and other people, and we just had them look at what they think and what needs to make this thing run better. And so, when we say we have 12 people, we really didn't. We had like 1.2 people because most of their time was diverted to gas. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
One thing I will point out is that person that Jason was talking about that we just designated to be inside the city, that was not a person approved by the council on the schedule of authorized positions. It was out of necessity how he's allocating his staff person's time. And so natural gas and and also just the SSRU had grown to the point that we were very behind in those work orders, but at the same time, you know, you're just constantly chasing your tail. And so this will be the first budget where you approve directly allocating people inside the city. Also, you have these ledger size sheets of paper, and on the second page, just as Jason is talking, this is also illustrative of the growth that we're talking about and why we're having this conversation now as opposed to 5 years ago. So this is just the cash. Compared to this cheat sheet, this shows you how much you actually have to spend, which is a much sadder number. But because most of the money is restricted, but this really shows you what we're talking about as we're talking about changing our business model because of the growth in our service area. So I just wanted to point that out to you for different funds. Jason?
Okay. So you can see some of the tasks they do on the next slide. Just, you know, there's 35 miles of streets to maintain. Do a lot of pothole patrol. We try to get to the potholes before a customer does, and we prioritize those repairs. We've got 10 miles of sidewalks. We maintain all the right-of-ways. We also have to maintain a 14.5-foot canopy height of trees over all the roadways for safety. And then with stormwater, we've got 7 pump stations and drainage inlets that we inspect on a regular basis. And I have to remind us again of development services. Where they are very vital in all the projects we're doing. We can't do the amount of projects we're doing without really focusing and leaning in, and that's why we're so grateful that you all authorized hiring two project managers in fiscal year 20 to address this, where we can accelerate projects, and they're really doing a good job of keeping us on a good path of paving and stormwater projects. And just some highlights from this fiscal year. Development services, they reevaluated all of the paving plan and the paving schedule as you requested, and they recalibrated our paving and resurfacing schedule, and we reduced that repaving cycle from 15-year cycle to 11-year cycle. So by the end of this fiscal year, we'll have repaved 4.3 miles of paving. We contracted out Precision Sidewalk Safety to keep all of the trip hazards down on our sidewalks. They do a certain section every year, and they have a patented grinding machine that goes by and takes care of that. So they continued this year. This year they worked on the section here right behind the high school. I believe they got all the way down that whole section.
What exactly are inch feet?
Inch feet, okay.
It's right here,
Yes, yes.
but it's okay, Google didn't know it either.
Yeah. Well, I wish I had their info sheet in front of me right now, but
I think that
It's-
was probably indecisiveness.
it's anything anything above a quarter of an inch hazard, they grind down. And the way that they determine how much they've done is by measuring that amount that's grinded per foot. Anything over a quarter of an inch, and then a foot in width, I guess, a foot in length, or, yeah,
I just didn't recall ever seeing that term.
yeah. Another thing the staff did this year, it's ongoing, is along Chesapeake Drive, the wetland area there, just opening that up, the wooded area where, you know, people can view wildlife and view the trees, and also clear the underbrush where people can utilize that area for walking their dogs and things like that. So we have another new person on our staff that's originally from Department of Environmental Protection, but he works with us now. He's the Public Services Coordinator, Justin Cook. He has a lot of experience with exotic species and wetland work, and so he brings with him that knowledge of being able to identify these plants and being able to remove them and do trimmings and things like that, and they're doing a really good job with that.
That was a good informative video that he did.
Oh, yeah,
That
that's,
yeah, that was
yeah, I
really
forgot
good.
about that. Mhm.
Good
Jason,
idea. No,
Jason, on the addition of all the staff, wasn't the termination of the inmate contract a pretty significant offset to the added cost of the new people in that?
The inmate contract, that was about 67,000, 65, 67,000. So the added staff, you know, there's an offset, but it's not a wash.
Okay.
It's
But
not a wash.
the offset is the local option fuel tax pays for, by combining streets and, you know, stormwater together, obviously there's that added transparency for your citizens of being able to see the monies that are collected versus where they're spent. And so local option fuel tax is what pays for the streets maintenance. It isn't, again, it's not coming out of just general fund bottom line.
Right.
And so we're able to do that as that local option fuel tax number continues to go up. Yeah. And Jason, we're gonna maybe kind of need to click through. I'm just keeping an
Okay.
eye on time
All
for
right,
you a little bit.
got it. Just tell me if I'm going too fast.
I'll do it.
Okay. So there's highlighted streets that we are paving this year, have paved, and will pave before October. Our financial performance for fiscal year 2020 shows you there are projected expenses and broken down into the different categories. It's our paving map showing everything that's been paved since 2015. Everything in green. And that's our projected paving for 2021, everything that's in purple, correct? Let's see.
Yellow,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yellow, I'm sorry, yellow.
or gold, or whatever.
And then we've also got 2022 and 2023 in there with the different colors. Just to highlight the projects for next year, those are the streets that we're including in the plan. And
This is a pie chart that you don't have, council. Again, we added a few more charts for extra credit in the streets and stormwater section, but we'll give you some updated. Our printer broke today. But we added a few more charts just for your comparison.
mhm. Again, there's some highlights from this year. East District project 70% complete. The Barrett Florida Avenue project is underway. Both those will be completed next year. And some other things down there. We already talked about Chesapeake Drive, and believe it or not, that last one, I'm not sure if I should have put it in there, but I was impressed. So, a lot of dog boxes get cleaned, and if staff did not do that, you know, there's issues that could relate to getting in their stormwater drains and things like that, so that's significant. And it's just to let you know some of the things our staff do that you might not think about.
Should we not have a bigger tax for people that have really large dogs?
That's a good point.
No.
Like the mayor?
Many, I've tried many places, but they really aren't. I've actually had other dog owner walkers say the same thing, so thank you.
Good. Well, that's a daily activity for staff, by the way.
I was gonna say it has to be because they never smell it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll pass that on.
Then you know what people talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a slide showing our fiscal year performance projection. Again, this is kind of a moving target because we're still in the fiscal year. And you were talking earlier about loan proceeds. So there's going to be, I guess you could call it a surplus, but those loan proceeds are going to be used partially this year and into next year for projects that are earmarked for those loans. So we just want to show you that there is a difference in the revenues and expenses, and it just has to do with we over budgeted the loan proceeds, and we're going to catch up with the projects to take care of those loan proceeds toward the end of this year and next year. So, anybody have any questions?
Did we ever look at, when we decided to do the maintenance on the streets, as far as just contracting that out for like a landscaper to do that, the price difference of the equipment and replacing all that, did we look at any of that? Is that something we could look at in the future as we move forward?
We sure can. I have not. So you're
Just
talking
curious,
about,
you know, 'cause-
talking about like the right-of-way maintenance, mowing and trimming?
Yeah, just as far as having a landscaping company look at doing that versus us having insurance and liability and new equipment every 2 or 3 years. I was just curious if we did look at that part of it.
Mhm.
But I can tell the guys are doing a good job though. I've seen them hustling around and doing the, you know, where the right of ways would just be overgrown all the time. It looks much better.
Good.
Yeah, of course, we do contract out, you know, the Highway 98 and
Right.
also portion around the community center. And those costs, you know, they do increase obviously with inflation. And so it wouldn't be too difficult, but recontracting out the maintenance of Highway 98 is something on our to-do list for this next year, just because it's time to do that. And so it would be a good opportunity just to compare then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay, so good question. Stormwater projects. So this shows the projects from 2015 to present and what's ongoing this year. Purple?
Can I ask you a question on the stormwater on the project? I noticed on Bear Street, they're doing all these drains on both sides of the road, and right now they're just putting gravel around it. Will that be concrete one eventually with the asphalt around it? Will it be curved around it so there won't be any
I'm
leaves?
certain it will be, but I'm gonna ask Clifton over here to make sure.
Yes, there will be a concrete apron poured around those. The reason they put the gravel around right now is for erosion control.
Right, I figured that.
So there will be aprons poured around those to encapsulate those structures and also to help capture the water and funnel it into the drain.
So will it have like a lip around it? So I know there's a lot of oak trees up and down Bear Street. I'm just concerned that those drains are going to get full with all these oak. Will it have some type of buffer around the backside of it, or will it be flat?
I'm not exactly sure, Councilman. Some of them I think are flat in nature, but the drains that are on top of them,
Mm-hmm.
they will capture most of those leaves because the leaves aren't as big as what the drains itself are. Now, with that being said, will it be a maintenance for us to go by and check them if we have a rain event coming? More than likely, we would have to have our personnel go by and make sure the drains are clear at the time. But, you know, we can look at maybe cutting a slot in those drains if it gets to be a problem over time, or certain ones that might be a problem. You usually cut maybe a 3 or 4 inch slot in them. That allows everything to go in the drain, and if anything goes on top of it, then it obviously won't clog.
Mm-hmm.
As far as it going down the drain, it shouldn't be a problem once if leaves go down the drain. It should flow onto the lift station, and the pumps would grind it up and pump it out.
So there's grinders with those pump stations that take care of all that too, huh?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So for fiscal year 2021, we're looking at a project. It's part of the Gilmore Basin project that we have a grant that technically hasn't been awarded yet. It's
Correct.
approved. And so you won't see it in the budget as a revenue, nor will you see it in the spending plan in the budget yet. But it's a 50% grant for an outfall project that, should you decide, that's a project that we could do in 2021 once the grant's awarded. And it's a partial project of the overall Gilmore project. It basically includes a vortex sediment system that will receive sediment and trash and sand from stormwater pumping. It also includes replacing an old force main, a section of force main, and adding a new force main for the future project. So this is a project that is partially grant funded, and it would improve water quality when there are storm events by trapping sand and trash and debris from getting into the sound.
Is
There's
this the one with the 5-foot pipe that goes into the pond by Eufaula? Is that the one you're talking about? Is
I
that what
believe
this is?
that's it. Thomas, are you on the line? I guess you didn't.
Oh.
Okay.
Hey, Thomas.
So I'm going to jump in if I can. So the council, you may recall last year during budget workshop, I asked Jason and Thomas to include this slide again because this may feel very familiar to some of you. We had the same conversation then. But originally, when Thomas and Jason were presenting this to you, there's the Eufaula project, which originally had an estimate of about $260,000, and I can find it in planning documents. Going back before the storm, and so that project, that was an original ballpark number, and Thomas has explained to me as they've looked at the feasibility why that project has grown. And we have, as Jason just said, we have a grant approved for 50% of that, but it hasn't been awarded yet. On the other end of that picture is Barry. And Barry, we applied for restore money, and likewise, we haven't received that money yet either. But what the council at one time talked about is connecting those two projects together. And if you were to do that, there are 16 homes which have received repetitive flooding. That means just more than once, that were affected by the 2014 flood. And so a year ago, you did approve us proceeding with the design to look at this as one large project. And I guess where I'm going with all of this is that because of COVID, there are grant opportunities available to the city, CDBG money, and otherwise, where a year ago that wasn't part of the discussion. And so we would like to revisit this, and that's one of the reasons why Tom's on the phone and Clifton is here to answer any questions you have, because my recommendation to you is that for this coming year, we do proceed with Eufaula, but you approve staff working with your your master services engineer and also Emerald Coast Planning Council, who both are working with cities for CDBG money, and we see if we can't leverage those local dollars and go after more grant money. CDBG is Community Development Block Grant money, and typically we do not have the low to moderate income that qualifies us for those funds, but because of COVID, we do, and that it's significant funding, so I hate to just leave that opportunity on the table. Thomas? What did I leave out?
That covers it.
Okay. Any thoughts on that?
No, it sounds like a good idea. Would that delay the process for an indefinite length of time, or is that something we probably heard?
Great question. So if you recall, when we looked at your debt service at the last budget workshop, 40 cents of every dollar spent on stormwater is spent on debt, and of the remaining portion, there's 50% of capital projects is paid for through the rate, and the other is paid for through your general fund subsidy. So when we talk about there being grant opportunities, it means less of a burden on your general operating fund, which is comprised of your tax dollars and other revenues. So when the council analyzed your stormwater fund and you looked at moving forward with the East and West Basin and these feasibility studies and designs, it was anticipating a state revolving loan fund for this West Basin. And so we have not applied for that loan yet. You can apply for it 3 times a year. but it wouldn't hold up the process because we have not yet done that. We can't apply for a loan until we can show the revenue, which means we have to get the actual grant award before we would be able to go to a bank and, or even if it's the state, and show them how we plan to pay back the city's portion and what we're paying towards a part of the principal.
Okay, so. Well, that sounds good to me, if we can, expand it and, have better coverage and make a bigger difference in terms of those homes. I'd say move forward.
Okay, great. We appreciate that. I don't hear any. Okay.
Is that the same, were we looking at changing the water line too on Eufaula? Is that part of that same project? Wasn't there a water main with a main water line that we're supposed to be looking at? Because I know we had that
Yes.
water break right there on the corner of there off of Shoreline,
Yes,
right?
the goal was to add a low-pressure sewer
Right.
line and also change the water line to
And is that
replace
part,
it.
is that part of the same project, or is that something
It's
different?
separate, but we would do it at the same time because the
To clean up the
ground.
roads, and the road's supposed to be repaid.
Yes, sir.
next
And
year
it's
anyway.
funded totally different. It's funded out of 401.
But it would, yes, it would all happen at the same time. I understand it's spaghetti under there.
Yeah,
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. So there's just a summary of our spending plan for 2021. And we also included a table there of just our stormwater master plan showing estimated costs, actual costs.
For anybody who wants to see that close up, if you'll actually flip to the narrative before you get to the natural gas tab, that's the end of your streets and stormwater narrative. Should be a green natural gas tab. And then you can flip back to these slides that Jason's going over with you. He's referring to your narrative there. A page that looks like this. So if we get to the green tab here. Yep, you got it. A plus.
Thank you.
You're right there. You're like so high. Perfect. All right, Jason.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, no, we did all that. You're gonna go over it.
Do you want to go over
All
the-
right, I'll go over it. I think this is very important. And so, council, what you have here, we refer to a lot as the Stormwater Master Plan. This is your report card. This is what you can share with your citizens, what has been done and what is left to be done. And so, most notably, based on the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget, all major projects will have been completed or have a funding plan in place by the end of fiscal year 2021. That means within 5 years of the 2014 500-year historic flood event, you will have, funded or completed all major projects for that stormwater plan. So this is what Thomas and Jason and their team are referring to all the time, and for me this is really what matters. So that is not to say that there are not small minor stormwater projects that when grants or other monies come available, you have those in your 10-year capital improvement plan. But this is the list, and you see in pink, those are the projects which have been completed, which required significant funds.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Also included are the maps from the master plan, from the feasibility studies to the projects to the completed in progress and future projects.
red dots representing that? Houses that flooded?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Yes, yeah. So because it was a, 500-year flood event, obviously if we were talking about in the, let's say the East Basin area, if we were talking about a $2.2 million project plus another $250,000 for design for something that might only, happen once every 500 years, your public would say that that play isn't a good investment. And so what you have here is it shows, well, that perhaps anomaly aside, where are those areas that are lower in the basin where there's been repetitive flooding? And that is really where your stormwater task force focused their recommendations.
There been any thought of buying it out or anything?
Well, FEMA has a buyout program, but it hasn't, when we talk about repetitive flooding, we mean more than once. We do not have properties that have flooded enough times that they would qualify for the federal buyout program, and nor would I make such a recommendation for it. I mean, a private developer would purchase the property, do some regrading, and it still be a viable property. So, yeah.
And we saw that on Gilmore, where they
Oh,
came
yes.
in. And
Yeah. Yeah.
where you see a lot of these red dots.
Yeah, you see that in northern Santa Rosa County. I'm sure Clifton can speak to that. There's definitely areas where it just doesn't make sense to invest in good infrastructure when the cost exceeds, what the property investment would be over time. But we don't have any of those areas. Okay.
So if there aren't any more questions, we'll move on to natural gas.
Okay.
Thank you, Clifford. Okay. So again, that's under the Public Services Division. For staffing, we're authorized 14 and a half full-time equivalent. Again, that half person, that part-time person is the one that we're also referring really to the streets and stormwater division that we want to convert to full-time. But it's in the authorized position list, it's still under gas. But so our request, and we've done a little bit of reorganizing, but we would like to eliminate a position in gas. There's a superintendent position that is not filled right now. We would like to take that out, move the part-time streets and drainage tech to streets and stormwater and make that the full-time position. And then add 2 new lead service worker positions with a net FTE of 15. So again, this is part of our public services manager and myself and the gas staff looking at how the department was staffed and what makes more sense. And this will give us 3 lead service workers who will lead crews in the field for maintenance and connection activities, whereas right now we've only had 2. And we have a natural gas supervisor, and really that person fulfills the supervisory role, and the superintendent position is just not something we see as needed, because we've got the public services manager, and he has a logistics officer and natural gas supervisor. So we'd rather have 3 lead service workers and not a superintendent. Gets us out in the field where we need to be.
So on this natural gas, is this from the city of Gulf Breeze all the way down the highway you're talking about?
Yes, and the beach.
And the beach. And how many natural gas customers do we have?
4,515. But that changes every day, but about
Could be
4,500.
16 by the end of the day.
Yeah, hopefully.
And out of the city of Gulf Breeze, how much is already built out? I mean, out of the city of Gulf Breeze, how many, is there a percentage that we have of natural gas customers in Gulf Breeze that you know?
I'd be taking a big guess if I told you that. I can tell you what I do know is
Okay.
that the beach growth has slowed. It's almost with COVID, as nobody's upgrading right now.
Okay.
But residential growth is booming out east. So
Right.
there's several subdivisions coming online. That's where we're really seeing the growth, and we expect it in the next couple of years, why we really need to get our guys staffed and get them out there. Not only doing connections, but putting some new main line in to receive new growth where it's happening. So yeah, there's a lot of, in fact, this is the first year, I think, where the residential rebate program exceeded the commercial rebate program. We went through all of our rebate money on the residential side, and we had to transfer some money from the commercial side, which is a good thing, because whenever you're spending rebate money, you're getting future business. So
And this is a rebate where they get so much credit per appliance they have
Yes.
that uses natural gas. There's some.
yes, sir.
So what about the two hotels, because they should be open, I would assume, next year? Will that have like a significant impact as far as the gas within the city?
Yes, yes, they are going to be good customers. Yep.
One other thing too, I remember, a few years ago, we were doing a lot of recruitment at the beach for anyone, to go on gas, and is that still, I don't know how full or not we are or complete in terms of, other than residential, are most of the hotels and the big users on gas at this point?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's I wouldn't say it's built out, but there just hasn't been a lot of movement. I think this year has been not a good year to look at, because I think with the vacationing not happening, businesses aren't investing in upgrading. But it's not something that we're turning our backs on, but right now we're maintaining relationships and just letting them know we're here, and when you're ready to upgrade, we're here. But we're not really pushing a lot over there. Our new natural gas marketing and customer service rep just started this year, so he's been, getting his feet wet in this business and doing a rebranding for the department, recognizing our logos and everything is just kind of outdated. So it's kind of a reset for the department and the way we're looking at marketing. But the obvious thing is that the residential growth is happening. That's kind of the no-brainer. So we're really going after that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And just to point out in the narrative, the commercial gas revenue has decreased 66.87% thus far. And so that shows you the impact of COVID. That's from where we projected to be this year to where we actually are. So, or less than even half the performance because of what's, how the beach has been impacted by COVID. So that means that we obviously had to tighten, and our belt and not do some of the capital projects that we had proposed. But then also going into next year, it means that we really had to cut back as well, because you're forecasting next year versus or from this year, and so that's part of why you're looking at just a very maintenance level budget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this year we had to use reserves to pay for relocating the gas line in association with the 17th Street bridge access. So there's some things we have to do. That was a $320,000 project, and so that cuts into our numbers for the year too. In addition to our $150,000 shortfall with the commercial business that we would have normally seen with the vacationers that we didn't see because of COVID. But
So how does that square in? I'm not arguing the position, but how does that square with increasing the staff?
Well, with the staff, what you're doing is making sure to concentrate staff within that division. Our work orders at one point this year, how far behind were we? We were like 3 months behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean for a week it was bad. I mean for most of the year. And so when you're talking about turbulence such as COVID and how it's impacting the commercial market, the one thing that we can do is make sure our residential customers have natural gas, and yet we were behind by about 3 months. And it has to do with the sharing of your personnel. And so even when we had emergencies in water and sewer, we had to take, those personnel and share. So that's what we're trying to do is we're concentrating the personnel within this department, but also we're making sure that it's adequately manned in order to address the work orders that we have. So you look first at what your work orders are, what that demand is, how long, and then secondly, how long is it going to take us? What I asked Jason at the beginning of this year is contract it out. Contract it, get rid of the backlog. I mean, just do what absolutely has to be done, even if we, it's about customer service. And so even if we come out netting zero, get rid of the backlog. Well, with the growth has not slowed during COVID. The housing developers, everyone is still building, and we were not able to cut on the backlog, which is why we're now coming to you saying the most cost-effective thing for us to do is to make sure that this fund is adequately staffed so that we can get on top of the work orders. So it's a long-term issue.
And as far as the authorized position list, the net change is 0.5 FTE, because we're taking away a superintendent and we're transferring that 0.5 to streets. So the net gain of 2 more is really just bringing us half up from where we are now on the authorized position. So
The idea then would be, if we get people on board like we want them to be, then the usage goes up.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
and the challenge too is keeping us staffed. Right now we're only at 11, and we're authorized for 14 and a half. So it's a challenge just getting people hired and trained to get out in the field and do the connections. So that's always been a challenge. But but for the fiscal year 2021, the proposed budget includes revenues and expenses of $3,708,312. Any questions? Okay, so next is our solid waste and transfer station, again under public services. So with COVID, we...
I don't think that's the right slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Keep going.
Man, I haven't been keeping up.
There we go.
Okay, I'll advance one. I'll catch up. So one of the big changes this year with COVID, the staff that we had, we were working with Landrum Services, they were contract staff. Virtually all of the folks that were working there were really at-risk employees just due to health issues and things like that. And so we decided to not have them work at the transfer station, and then we had, with kind of a lull in park and rec activities, we brought some folks from park and rec and some folks from South Santa Rosa and from the gas department to fill in that niche, which is a good thing we did, because with a lot of people being at home, demand for services went up. We went to operating for 4 days a week just to keep up for about a month. And from that, we decided it would make more sense to just have our own permanent city employees run the transfer station. And so one of the park and rec staff is now working there permanently as a service worker 3, kind of the supervisor of the operation. And then we've got 3 part-time service workers who will average about 27 hours a week through the year working at the transfer station. And another thing we did this year is we just recently upgraded the point of sale system. Allows for smartphone payment, and it's more efficient in utility billing as well. They can get real-time access of the financial data.
You telling me at the transfer station?
Yeah, the point of sale system's at the transfer station. It's like you can pay with your smartphone.
The square.
squared.
So it's not just a little metal box anymore that you.
They do
Yeah,
have,
just
they
give
do
us
receive
$10.
cash.
And you know what's, that's been another COVID-related issue. People are not wanting to handle cash. And so the usage went up, but people were wanting to pay with their phones and so, but again, when you look back at our accounting, you know, and finance, it actually might end up being a positive thing, because if we can make it more convenient for people, then it's less personnel time, you know, storing away cash and doing deposits. So interesting, but it was something that we had not planned, but we needed to make happen.
So we're doing, normally it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but we did 4 days for a while there, like a month or so. And then during the off season, it's just Tuesdays and Saturdays.
Sure.
And the hours are what
7 to 4, 7 to 4.
on those days?
Yeah.
So I assume that the amount of loads that we were taking out of there and all that went up significantly too. Were we losing money on it?
I don't know yet. But and I was just looking for the financial performance projection for 2020, and I'll ask you to refer to your narrative, because I've got the 2021 projection in the wrong spot. So
So is the 2020 actually 2021?
yeah.
Oh, it's the same.
So
Okay. So if we go to the narrative,
Page 203 in the narrative.
yes. So the transfer station revenue is anticipated to be $106,549 in fiscal year 2020, which is less than the $122,000 realized in fiscal year 2019. Expenses are expected to be about $80,165 as compared to $90,619 in fiscal year 2019. So even though our revenues are down, we still would project that we're going to be revenues exceeding expenses of about $30,000.
and it sounds a little weird when we're talking about increased demand during COVID, but this projection business is a moving target. We really won't know till the end of the year. But we did see a big push for about a 4-week period, but it has slowed back down to normal times now.
I'm going to pause just for a minute, because Councilman Schluter's question is a really good one, especially as a councilman who has been on the council previously and has certainly undergone your fair share of budget workshops. The transfer station for a very long time was subsidized by the general operating fund, which I assume is the reason for your question. Your question is really just how much were we under, because that's how much we would subsidize. But 3 years ago, when the city was looking at bidding back out its franchise agreement, we reviewed that and we staggered the rates based on the usage. What we found is that the majority of people using the transfer station were not from inside the city, which is the primary purpose. The reason why we have the transfer station is so that we don't have a lot of debris pickup for Republic. So you based your garbage disposal contract off of the assumption that our residents will be using the transfer station and we won't have as much code enforcement and just, you know, piles of debris that need to be picked up, you know, twice a week. And so the council, in discussing that the primary purpose is for it to benefit the city, and that's why you have a transfer station inside the city. No one wants a transfer station, but you have it there primarily for your residents. And so you adjusted the rates so that those who are non-city residents and significantly those who are contractors are paying more. And because you did that, it's now a balanced budget and it doesn't require any subsidy. So the fact that it came in, you know, 30 over, again, that's a projection we'll see by the end of the year, but we no longer subsidize that. We haven't for the last 2 years.
And how long has the new POS system been in place?
2 months, a month. A week.
Yeah.
Just seems like 2 months though.
Well, that's when we started talking about it.
And
So
who's
it-
in charge of closing that out and reconciling that? Is it whoever's,
So do you remember, on the finance side?
Yeah.
Yeah.
just curious.
We did, we really enjoyed the employees that we've had at the transfer station for many, many years. And again, an unfortunate part of the pandemic is that they were vulnerable to, due to age for their, with the pandemic. And so they are at home. We would hope to utilize them in some other capacity once we are past this health scare. But we, as Jason was saying, was able to move other employees around. And so Gus Ramirez, you may know Gus from the community center. He has a background in policing and security and retired from that line of work and now is our nighttime facility maintenance coordinator. So he is now the supervisor in charge at the transfer station. It works well because, you know, somebody with a prior background in security and police is doing a good job with supervising. So so the performance has not gone down at the transfer station at all, and they've been able, even with COVID, to handle the increase in usage.
And two of the part-timers were previous Landrum
Yes.
that worked there too. It's just they were just at one time 5 to 7 folks that were, you know, they all work part-time. So, but yeah, we have two of them. Two of the folks that did work there before have come back. But
So, because we had prisoners there too at times.
no, we don't have.
At one time though we did.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving to the staffing model and taking away the temporary services is basically a wash, so it's not increasing the bottom line.
It's a good service.
Yeah.
So there's our spending plan for 2021. Revenues and expenses of $893,000 and $400,000. $893,400. I'm not talking those high dollar amounts very often. Any more questions before we move on to water and sewer?
What's involved in that refuse retention fee?
Revenues retention fee.
The proposed,
On the proposed revenue side?
You're retaining refuse.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Doing the 58,000.
Do you know, Gene?
Isn't
Top of my head.
Isn't that the cost from interdepartment?
That's, at one time, we didn't charge ourselves anything. So the grass cuttings and everything else that went to the, transfer station, we didn't charge it out to ourselves. So we started doing that a couple of years ago to help balance out the solid waste fund.
So,
So
The
we're
city
charging
pays
our,
that
yeah.
we're just
itself?
kind of cycling the money back every year.
yes.
But, yeah.
And you do have a ordinance that says that you will do that. We, as it relates to water, I mean, we pay our water bill. And so this is consistent with your ordinance that says, you know, the city will be its own customer. Otherwise, that cost was being apportioned to other people. But good memory, Jean. That one stuffed me. Or something. All right.
Okay, water and sewer. And again, this is under the water and sewer department through Janae Robert. She's utility manager. She's responsible for water and sewer, wastewater and reclaim. And as you know, we've just underwent a rate study with Reftelis. And it's been a very thorough study. It took a little bit longer than we anticipated, so implementation of the recommendations is going to be a little delayed. One of the things that seems to make the most sense is combining 401 and 403 into one fund. One of the big reasons is we'll be able to, through a change in our ordinance with the impact fee, we'll be able to use that for the whole system throughout, instead of just using it outside the city. We'll be able to use that money where it needs to be. So that is something that we are going to come back and revisit. It's just, again, we've just fairly recently got the study, the results back. We've talked about that. You've talked to Ref Tillis. And for right now, we're moving forward with a 3% rate increase for now. And there's also some deferred maintenance that we need to address. And I forgot to put that list in here. But,
That's okay, they've seen it before.
you know, it's around $7 million worth of capital improvements, replacement, repairs, building expansions that we've been putting off because we haven't been able to afford it. And so one of the ways that we would like to reduce the debt service to not have to borrow for all that amount is to look at surplus property sales and using the proceeds from that to help fund some of these improvements. So we're going to talk to the board at our next board meeting about a couple of sites that staff had looked at operationally and Baskerville and Donovan has examined for us too, as far as
Leslie, could you pull that up? The email with the ERS sites.
Yes.
And council, that this will be familiar to you. This is the email summary that I sent you that shows ERS sites 1 and 3. Both we have received phone calls or conversations of people who would be interested in purchasing it on either one of those sites. And based on that, earlier in the year, we sought appraisals. And so you have some information about what those appraised, values would be. And that $7 million loan that you discussed with Ref Tillis, the reason for that is based on this, which is that you have no cash flow. And so in that situation, you either have to look at increasing your revenues by raising rates, or you have to sell some of your assets in order to have, more cash. And I'm sorry?
Or both.
Or both. Yes, exactly, or both. And so we also, in addition to seeking 2 appraisals for this property, we also asked your master consultant engineer, Baskerville Donovan, to revisit the capacity study for effluent disposal. And we actually received that report just today. And it says what we suspected, which is now that the city council has entered into a memorandum of agreement with Santa Rosa County and Holly Navarre, you are opening up that entire corridor for reclaimed customers. And so you don't need the land that you did just a year ago. And so that's very positive. We needed to actually see that, from your master consultant engineer. But also there was a recommendation that it certainly would be preferable to at least recapture a portion of the effluent disposal if possible. And so what the South Santa Rosa Utility Board will be discussing is whether to formulate in their recommendation back to the council any of those terms that would ultimately go to your real estate broker when they list the property. Do you just list it and see what you get? Or do you put those types of terms that we put, for instance, on the listing of the driving range? And so that'll all be part of the conversation. I know Mayor Pro Tem Tom Nail has driven both of these sites, but this certainly has the potential of significantly driving down the cost of having to finance capital repairs. And so getting back to Jason's presentation of the budget, at this time, those capital projects that you reviewed last year's budget workshop that we deferred are still being deferred. And in the last year, our emergency repairs went up significantly because we've been now, deferring, major capital improvements at the same time that we have had, explosive population. And so, you know, we have been taking every step we can in the research and analysis so that you won't have to delay much longer making a decision. The South Santa Rosa Utility Board meets Monday, but we're bringing this to you again because ideally what we would like is for y'all to generally discuss it tonight. If it's not something that you want the SSRU board to even deliberate, then we need to know that before we put the agenda out. And if it is something where, assuming that the SSRU board is going to be in favor of this versus a significant rate increase, then at your next council meeting, there would just simply be a consent item that says you've discussed it during budget workshop and that, you know, you're in favor of your real estate broker reviewing this and listing it and bringing you, you know, more information. So it would get the process started.
Of the 7 million in repairs, what percentage would you say is for in-city versus out-of-city?
It's a good question. We had meant to bring that spreadsheet as a memory refresher this evening, and we did not.
I'd say at least a third.
Okay.
I'm just curious if it would have any feasibility to take some of the CTA earnings, since we're going to maintain separate funds, and apply that to the in-city repair as a one-time thing versus waiting and deferring. Is that, you know, it's like, to me, this is one of the biggest issues we face right now, is the continual breakdowns in service, and water is a huge deal to people.
So the scenario that you present, Councilman, is what the council proposed during stormwater workshop several years ago, and that's how they were able to move forward with the stormwater, is with utilizing money from savings. So in this scenario, your city water and sewer fund has not seen a rate increase since 2012 aside from CPI. And the recommendation from the consultant is that if you consolidate both funds, which right now, the reason why they're making that recommendation is, as we've already talked, you're already sharing those resources. And so there's just this curtain as it relates to accounting, but not as it relates to personnel or actual resources. If you consolidate those two funds and you actually lower the rate of the SSRU to the same as the city rate, and then you charge the 25% surcharge that the city is entitled to by statute, and it is the same surcharge that everyone else already charges, and you leave that money in the fund, then you will be able to cover your operating, which right now you're not. And then in addition to that, because we have that deferred, you know, maintenance schedule, to me, you would not want to use reserves from CTA that you have either encumbered in your capital improvement plan for transportation, which is also very important. The reason why you're undertaking transportation is just on Fairpoint and Shoreline, you've had over 130 accidents in the last 5 years. So you wouldn't want to, you know, to hamper a public safety project for a water and sewer project when you have property. And this is property that you purchased for the purpose of wet weather storage.
Right.
And so if you're able to sell this property and have more cash, then you're able to do both.
And I agree with that strategy. I don't know where the rest of the council is, but I do. I was thinking in terms of if we have trouble selling the property, or if we don't get as much of it sold as we need to.
Well, I don't think that you'll have a problem just based on the just the topical conversation I had with your broker last week. But also, you know, I had a call from an individual just in the last couple of weeks saying, well, we want to give you our offer right now. We don't want you to ever list it.
Okay.
Will you take my offer?
That
And
answers the question.
yes, so I think there's some people who, I think it'll come down to the council weighing each offer and deciding whether it's, you know, a good business decision, but I don't think you have to worry about not getting offers.
You said we already have 2 appraisals on these properties, or we're?
You have an appraisal, one appraisal on both properties, yes.
On both properties from the same guy?
Yes, it's from Sean Brantley,
Right.
yes.
But you had mentioned you were gonna get 2 appraisals.
No, I didn't, if I did, I misspoke. I just have 1 appraisal on each.
Oh, maybe you were saying you have 2 appraisals, meaning
Yes.
one on each, okay, I thought
Yes.
you were saying we had 2 separate appraisals on.
We have not done that in the past. If you, I mean, I can,
I'm sure our realtor can give us a value too.
she can, they can give you
That
brokers.
supports-
The West
Yeah.
Orange back 9
And-
we did too. right?
And she has reviewed both appraisals, but if, in talking with her, that if y'all want a second appraisal, you certainly can, but you're right, she can give you a broker opinion about it. So I would just like to generally hear your thoughts. Are you amenable to us presenting this to the South San Rosa Utility Board? Does this make good business sense to you, Councilman Torgerson? But I just want to make sure I don't get out ahead of the council.
And do we know what these appraisals are? Do we have copies of them?
Yes, we,
They're on the screen, but they're hard to
I
read.
can't see that.
You know,
Leslie, actually, the email that I forwarded to you has it at,
The biggest,
So about 484
acres, that's behind the zoo.
together.
Right.
Admin building, there's some wetlands back there also.
Oh, yeah,
That's
there's
the
another one.
biggest.
The other one is the back 9.
oh, good, y'all
left.
can read that.
But that, is that just a realtor's value, the back west 9?
So what are the 2 numbers
West
added
Forest.
to?
No, that's an appraisal,
Oh, okay.
yes. So,
What
there's
are,
a
what are the
third,
2 numbers add up to?
okay, I'm gonna have to read this, because there's a spreadsheet, but I,
A total of 3 properties.
Oh,
so, so also, part of the conversation, and I omitted at talking about this, was, the 51 acres of the West Golf Course.
Mhm.
That isn't something that the council or SSRU board has talked about in the past. And so I am not making a recommendation on what to do with it, but I just think it needs to be talked about. And so the appraised value of the 51 acres of the West Golf Course is 4.6. The ERS Site 1 that we have had interest on is 83 acres, again, about 30 acres of that is wet. The appraised value is $3,028,000, and that appraised value takes into account the wetlands. And then ERS Site 3, where we've had the most amount of interest, is about a little over 17 acres. Appraised value is a little over 1.3. And so if you add those 2 together, you've got about 4 million in ERS 1 and 3. And then you have the rest of the West Course, which I know is more controversial, but it's good to know.
That area is across the highway, north side of 98, across from
Zoo, no,
the zoo and
Yeah.
admin area.
I never remember where the flea market is in there.
Mhm. Next to
So, but is that best use appraisal on the West Golf Course? Is that as it is? What is that appraisal number?
The appraised number is, it is,
Best use?
hold on, I'm looking, that is highest and best use.
Okay.
And that still assumes that not all of it would be, developed, but that it would be residential.
Hmm.
What about the other 2? Are those highest and best use?
Yes.
As well? Okay.
Yes.
But it's not tied to people's backyards. Like a golf course is.
Right,
Sure,
exactly.
sure. So of that $7 million catch-up loan, that potentially, you could pay for more than, half of that through the sale of land. So,
I think it would be certainly worth exploring and, as SRUS, discussing it and then just seeing, what your thoughts are. I feel like that is a good opportunity and we know we'll never need that land for anything. Then if it will also keep rates lower, that, I think it could be a good thing, but I definitely think it's worth exploring. I don't know.
I agree with what you're saying, but just to build on that, I would like to see a rate structure that helps ensure that we never end up in this position again, where we have to sell assets to meet maintenance that has been deferred for decades.
yeah.
Do you know, another thing that I thought about just listening to these past budget days is, we're really being aggressive and proactive about trying to catch up on deferred maintenance in every department and replace and do. But I guess in my thinking the other night, is all of this gonna come due? Is it gonna recycle and then again at another point in time, we wouldn't have the deferred maintenance hopefully because we would have kept up with it. But then what about these new capital purchases that, you know, that we're making, or equipment and things. Cause I mean, it's a significant amount of money, obviously, we're talking about now almost everywhere, it seems like.
Well, in the past, and again, when I talk about the past, it's so important to look at these bar graphs to understand how we are living in a different day. We're just living in a different day than we were 5 years ago because of growth. And so when you think about the 2014 flood and you think about, you know, the natural disasters in, 2005 and 2008, what happened is that after those disasters, the city received disaster recovery money. And so oftentimes it was with, federal monies that we were able to purchase the new vehicles and equipment. And the city, the Public Works Department was definitely better than most, other than I'll say police and their replacement cars. But when it came to thinking about the cost of replacement and maintenance. But what we have now is a process, a managed budget process that's built into our numbers. And so when we talk about encumbered funds versus unencumbered, or restricted versus unrestricted, restricted means that by your own policy or by a state law, we cannot spend it. It is restricted. Encumbered means that in your capital improvement plan, you just already earmarked it for something. So something that's encumbered can be unencumbered just by y'all's own discussions. And so you won't find yourself in a situation where you have a new capital project and then you can't afford the ongoing cost throughout its lifespan because you did not have a capital improvement plan. You adopted one last year for the first time. And so that's part of that process now. When we go through our 3-month, budget process, you are about a month and a half of that 3-month process. We start it much earlier because we're looking at those costs of capital replacement and renewal and making sure that it works into the budget. And you didn't have that. It is, when I say it's like baked into the process, to use Councilman Torgerson's phrase, it's in our BSNA software. And so we take that capital improvement plan once you approve it, and then we work those, maintenance costs into the lifespan of that, of that infrastructure, whether it's 15 or 20 years. I'll just say one more thing as it relates to paving. So the lifespan of a road is 15 years. You would not want to be replacing a road earlier than when you would need to because you're throwing away good money. So when we're talking about a level of service standard. When we say we've shortened it to 11 years, again, we're talking about catching up on roads that are in very bad disrepair. And Jason talks about that in his narrative, and what he says is the roads which have been identified as the worst condition in the city, most of them are being caught up this year and next year. And so after that, you'll go back to 15 years. And we're looking at that the same with all of your capital assets and the depreciation and maintenance. So it would be, barring a disaster, with FEMA money where it allows you to be a little bit more liberal with your spending federal money to get equipment, it would not be a best practice for us to look at using money for one-time capital cost and not look at the recurring expenses.
So what are we thinking, to go ahead and put it up for SSRUS discussion and just see what they think?
I think to avoid the confusion and so forth, when this happened last, the SSRU was tasked with coming up with a plan and checking it out. So we definitely need to either direct it or request it from council and give SSRU direction on to proceed. The council, the SSRU basically is advisory consultative to city council, so just clear direction from the city. We can task the SSRU with that, and then when they bring it back, it's all in order.
I think it's pretty expanded.
I do too.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right.
I'm just concerned about the list course.
Yeah, me too.
No, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of pushback on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
but I think we should definitely look at it. You know, and like Todd said, we need to look at, make sure the rates are in line too as we move forward.
Okay.
All right, great. Anything else on 403?
Just go over some of the projections.
Yep.
If we get caught up on the slides. Can you put us back on track, Leslie? Slides, please, thank you.
And also, if you go to the budget narrative tab, you know, we just provide, we try to keep the slides to no more than 5 for every department. These are just highlights, but there's, you know, just more graphs I bring to your attention, and the unfunded capital requests just for this year are included in your narrative.
Thank you, yep. Yeah, so we're only including capital items that we can include in the budget and maintain a balanced budget. So, as Samantha said, there's a listing of unfunded items in the narrative and what's funded. And also, with the rate study, Rep. Tillis looked at staffing and staffing needs in the future, and with projected growth, recommended additional staff of a 3-2-1 over the next 3 years. Three staff added next year, 2 the following year, then 1 the year next. Now, that's not in this slide presentation, and we're not requesting the 3 service workers now, but we will be, because we do need those positions, but we're not in a position to fund those yet. So for 401, that is water and sewer inside the city. The projected revenues and expenses are just under $3 million. And basically for inside the city, we provide water to almost 2,600 customers and sewer to 1,550 customers. And we're still looking at the STEP program too, of getting some grant funding for that. With the CDBG money, we're also completing
Yes.
that. So highlights the water system there, our elevated tank and number of hydrants and the miles of sewer, water mains, and 26 lift stations and 16 miles of sewer lines. And you know, one of the projects that we can't fund yet that we'd like to is upgrading the 26 lift stations to remote monitoring. And also do that outside the city where they're on a SCADA system, where staff can be alerted of issues and respond accordingly. And we're one of the only utilities in the area that does not have their lift stations under remote monitoring. And so that's something that would really be a significant achievement. It would be save a lot of manpower where they can focus on other things and have more reliability of the system and less sewer overflows. So, just some of the. I'm sorry.
It must be expensive.
It's about 5,000 a station.
And we have how many?
We've got 87 total.
Right.
As a matter of fact, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's something to just think about. Okay, thanks, Jason.
Is there a plan to do so many a year? I mean, you can't get there unless you start somewhere on those two.
Yeah.
Well, it's in our unfunded capital request for next year.
But we did also go to lunch with a consultant who said, you do not want to do that. You want to bid out the project all at once. You want to improve all of your SCADA, and then that is going to tell you to a large part where your most significant repairs need to be made. And so if you just improve some of it, it's like trying to diagnose a patient and only looking at that patient by the foot or by the hand. And that was good, meaningful information to us because it was, you know, a consultant who, you know, is talking to a lot of utilities and could tell us mistakes that have been made in the past, but that makes a lot of sense, right? And so we would need to build up some cash flow to be able to do that first. Yeah.
Some of the highlights from 2022. We did some replacements of equipment in the water plant. The elevated tank was inspected and cleaned out, and it's going to be getting painted in the fall. Fresh coat of paint. The groundwater storage tank was washed out and inspected. On the sewer side, go ahead.
What page you on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to hand me the clicker?
Take
Give
this
it. Let me
away.
drive. Let me drive.
Multitask. I was just reading off the screen. That's what I should have been doing. To keep
Yeah.
track. Okay, so.
You're at 401,
Okay.
right?
Okay, sorry about that.
You're in 401, Water City.
I'm in
Water?
401,
Okay.
one slide back.
Okay.
Yeah, just some of the highlights on the sewer side. Our fats, oil, and grease program, we've really started to implement that more fully this year. And our cross-connection control program has been updated. That's our backflow preventer program. We have done lift station surveys to survey for the reliability and safety of all the stations, so we know what needs to be done to the stations. We just need to have the funds and manpower to do it. We're on a pump replacement program of the lift stations that have pumps that do not meet reliability and safety standards. And next slide. So our spending plan provides a balanced budget of almost $3 million for 2021. That includes 3% CPI rate increase. And again, the capital requests, we do have some in there limited to what we can afford to keep the balanced budget. And so that's 401. Any questions on 401? All right. South State Road Utility System. The financial performance for that is a little over 10 million. Our capacity fee, or our restricted impact fee reserve, I don't know what are we calling that officially?
We're going with capacity
Okay,
fee.
capacity fee. So I think I originally had that as impact. I just need to
Yeah.
know. $6 million is our reserve balance, and this year with all the growth, residential growth out east, we're looking at about a $2.2 million revenue for this year. List the staff in there. Okay, next slide. The description, obviously it's customers outside the city. Water system also has an elevated tank and a groundwater storage tank. About 230 fire hydrants, 62 miles of water main, 62 lift stations, 57 miles of gravity enforced mains, and a 2 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant that is slated for expansion hopefully in 2021 with the help of a Restore grant. And this year we completely refurbished the centrifuge. We did the 20,000 hour service on it. Reject tank was washed out and inspected. Reuse elevated tank was visually inspected on the outside. We did a study with Basco and Downerman on the westward reuse expansion, which also looks at, if we have expansion out west, that allows us extra capacity when we're talking about land sales. We have a lot of options that many utilities don't have. So we've got the whole western portion of our service area that, could give us capacity for reuse. We were approved for the regional reclaim expansion project, phase 3, with the interconnect with Holly Navarre water system. So that's hopefully a $2.5 million grant that we will have to interconnect with Holly Navarre reuse. And talked about the Restore grant for the treatment plant. We did a lift station survey for SSRUS as well. Condition survey of all the lift stations. And the East Course irrigation project is complete with the new pump house, and it's operating very well.
So can I ask you a question then?
Yep.
So I know that we were talking before about the capacity of the current sewer plant, and with all the new growth that we're talking about, the gas and this and that, surely that's got to be impacting that, or is that having to be moved up quicker because of that?
Well, yes. We're behind, and DEP is, we approached DEP, Department of Environmental Protection.
Yeah.
We approached them with an idea to do an interim re-rating of the treatment plant where we just do a little minor modification to bring the capacity up a little bit to get us over this hump in the economy to hopefully get the prices down for full expansion.
Right.
They were in agreement with it but didn't really like it. So, but now with this Restore grant, that kind of changes everything. It kind of puts us in a position where financially there's more of a green light. But really compliance-wise with DEP, we really don't have much of a choice. They're really wanting us and expecting us and to the point of giving us a compliance order warning, which we have not seen the report yet, that we have not kept the schedule they've wanted. So we are, and I think one of the reasons we got the Restore grant is because of where we are with our capacity and our expansion schedule. We are much closer to our max capacity than Milton is, and I think that had an impact, in my opinion, on the deciding factor of us getting that grant. And so, to answer your question, yes, we need to build a plan. We need to expand it. So, we're kind of looking at scheduling with the SRF loan application process, and if everything runs smooth, then we can look at starting to advertise, I think, in June of 2021. So,
And on the impact fees that we were talking about a minute ago, it seems like when the gentleman that did the study, he was saying that they were actual, that we should break that up in different ways, so where the actual cost of the tap fee and this and that be taken out of the impact part of it, and then that way it's not all unusable, for lack of a better word. Is that something we're looking at doing now too, as we move forward?
Jean has done that in preparation of the budget, so that the tap fees for accounting is separate from the capacity fees. And then in addition to that, yes?
It's on the list.
Okay, will be. Certainly talking about it a lot. And
Yes.
so, yes. And Mary Jane they're actually waiting on me to schedule a phone call. I have seen those emails. But they're working on the updated impact fee ordinance. So
in order for us to do that, we have to
have the ordinance.
change the ordinance.
And it's not just the ordinance, the big deal is that you have to have the data and analysis, which is the major portion of what you contracted Reftelis consultants to do.
Right.
You can't just have, and this is actually, and I don't want to speak ill of our county, so I'm not casting any aspersions, but this is why they're in a lawsuit, because the Home Builders Association has said your data and analysis was insufficient for the impact fee ordinance that you just adopted. That's the whole basis of their lawsuit. And so that is why when Jason says our analysis took longer than we thought, that's why it took a year, because in the end, you're gonna have this book that shows here's what our capacity needs are.
Right.
And we also need to demonstrate why we're using it system-wide, that we have capacity issues inside and outside the city. And so that means Mary Jane is our attorney needs to draft all that and for you to approve it. That has to happen before Jean can put together a new consolidated fund. You have to have that legal foundation and the data and analysis first. So we are really trying to get there for you. We know that it makes the best sense for everybody, but we're just where we are.
Nothing's quick, is it?
This is a complex
Yeah.
matter.
Okay.
And Reftelis has been, I think, is laying the foundation for what we need to do to update our ordinance.
Right,
to-
it seemed like a great concept. I was like,
Right.
okay, let's just do that.
And because
it's not-
under statute, you can only use the impact fee
Right.
for the capacity needs, and,
But there's more cost than just that in there. As far
The
as-
tap
been
fees
some-
as well.
There's
some,
been absorption of.
Yeah, the
yes,
connection
there's been
fee.
some sort of
Yeah.
You break it.
overlap that we need to make sure we account for and keep straight. So,
Clarify.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, that was my only two questions.
No, that's a great question, and it just shows y'all were really listening in that workshop, so that's great. That's great.
Good job.
I know, y'all, you got it.
Here and there.
That was a long workshop.
No.
All right, have we covered this one, the 21? No, we've not.
Yep.
Spending
That's
plan?
just sorry.
Okay,
That's our spending plan. for 2021, $6,865,633, includes a 3% rate increase. And again, the capital request limited to what we can afford with the revenues. So, any questions?
No, that was a lot of information. Thank you, Jason.
So, council, as you can tell, the difference in how we're treating these two funds versus your other funds is we're looking at your unreserved cash balance in natural gas and making recommendations to you on capital projects. We're not doing that here because we can't do that. And so what we're telling you is this is a placeholder, and we're gonna be working to get the rest to you, we hope, within 60 days of the new fiscal year. That's what we're really hoping to do.
I'm thinking assume that a piece of the property sells, that we can attack the most vulnerable pieces of that $7 million correction, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
the way to look at it. So we don't have to wait to do everything at one time. We can
Yeah.
start to get after it.
Absolutely. Consolidate, well, first, we've got to address updating your impact fee ordinance, then consolidate the funds. And that certainly can happen, has to happen before you're talking about prioritizing capital needs. But yes, you can absolutely, you can take that a bite at a time. Okay. And then let's see, Ron, perfect timing. For your viewing pleasure, we have last for you before your regular meeting at 5:30, Tiger Point.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
A lot of
Jason.
material.
That was-
Everybody doesn't delve
Departments.
into grease, kitchen grease, waste,
Trash.
waste, water, trash, good to do. So, yeah, good.
I know we were talking about doggy bags a minute ago, but I think we delved in pretty deep.
Pretty granular, wasn't it?
He's got it.
No special taxes.
That's right. Those big dogs.
Speaking of big dogs, go ahead, Ron.
Hey.
I'm going to share with you the budget narrative. Ron just left a meeting with a citizen, and so he and I were texting back and forth, and he made good timing, but so switching gears here.
Sam, do you have any prefacing remarks?
Aside from it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah, the probably the main points, council, you can find in your budget narrative. Here's a slide.
It's okay, that's fine, thank you.
And it shows you the projection for where we expect to end this year. But of course, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, right now is when most of our golfers are out there, so we don't know. But there might be we might be under revenues by over 300,000. And then you also see the number in your budget narrative for next year, which we may have to again subsidize Tiger Point by over 200,000 if we were to carry it for the entire 12 months. So that's the gist. But there has been a lot of progress made, and Ron's going to talk through some of the revitalization of the course with you.
Yeah, I can candidly say to you today that in the 25 years that I've been playing out at Tiger Point, it has never been in as good a shape as it is today. That course is head and shoulders above any other course in the area, and I'd put it up against some of the high-end courses in the Destin area. The turf quality, the greens, and I'm talking about the playability of the golf course itself and the actual golfing experience. The clubhouse is what it is. You know the clubhouse, you've seen the clubhouse, there haven't been any significant changes in the clubhouse. The operation of the golf course since the beginning of COVID, since the pandemic, I won't say that the pandemic has been good for the golf course, but the golf course has been able to maintain operations throughout the pandemic because the activity allows itself to social distancing. And it's one of the few activities that individuals can continue to participate in during this time. So from that perspective, that's a positive aspect for the operation of the golf course. If I can direct your attention to the 2020 financial performance page, this page, Leslie. Right. One more.
I fell down on the job.
There you go. What you're seeing here, the top three lines: anticipated revenues, expenses, net costs. That reflects the golf operations. That's the cost of operating the golf course. The next lines under the city's anticipated loss at $148,361. Those are the costs that a landlord would expect to have to take care of while he was renting out a facility to some renters. Those are the things that we have to, assume direct responsibility for. Now, even having said that, it's all city money. We are paying Troon Honors $100,000 a year to manage the city's money. So when we show the combined anticipated cost of $328,349, that is all city money. But operationally, the point that I want to make is that operationally, the golf course was functioning $179,000 in the hole when you look at golf revenue versus golf expenses. Did I muddy the water, or am I clear on that? You understand what I'm saying?
Golf expenses, then, are you saying just as far as playing and not as far as maintenance?
No, I'm talking about the maintenance of the course and the whole 9 yards. The $148,000, the city's anticipated loss of $148,000 represents the kind of things, if we had to put a new roof on the clubhouse, that would be figured in that. That's not something that Troon Honors figures into their operational costs. Okay? If there were termites, the cost of termite care for that building, that's a city expense, that's a landlord expense, not necessarily a Tiger Point operating expense.
The IT, utilities, the liquor license, all those owners' expenses, if you own
Building
property.
insurance, is that part
All
of that
that,
too?
yep.
So those and I'm just trying to make a distinction for you between the actual cost of operating the golf course versus the revenues that those, and then differentiating that from owner's expenses.
And how does
but
that compare to last year, the expense?
If you go to there, very next slide. We knew you'd ask that.
No.
there you go.
It's right here for you. It's still small, but it's.
So the one last point that I want to make on that is on the operational cost at $179,988. $100,000 of that amount is the fee that we pay Troon Honors to manage that course. So again, that's a cost to the city, but overall, I think the point that I'm trying to really get at is the golf course operation is improving because of the expertise that Troon Honors brought to the operation and their ability to improve the conditions of play out there. Do I think it's gonna break even next year? Not even close. I think it's gonna be better. I think the projections are going to be better than you see today. You know, I think the projections on that, that $179,000, $998 number, they're projecting to be at $134,000 next year. So probably a $50,000 improvement in the bottom line. Still gonna be red, still gonna be negative.
What is like the break-even point as far as how much play on the course? I mean, if we're doing as well right now as we've ever done, basically, how many more golfers would we have to have out there to reach the break-even?
Councilman, right now, the 2020 budget was built on 30,800 rounds of golf. The forecast for the end of this year, when we get to the end of this year, they're forecasting 32,713 rounds of golf by the end of this fiscal year. Next year, they're building a budget on 34,665 rounds of golf. My estimation, it's going to take 38,000 to 40,000 rounds of golf to break even.
Does that exclude any food, beverage, that side of it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. The food and beverage operation has been significantly curtailed since the COVID. We went for a long time with the clubhouse and food and beverage completely shut down. The only food and beverage that was being provided was on the golf cart for the golfers out. We have, since the governor has gone into phase 2, we have a very limited sandwich menu inside. The positive side of that is that right now, food and beverage is $7,700 to the good over expenses. There's $7,700 more revenue right now than there have been expenses in food and beverage. But that's because of the very limited course that we've taken with it.
I just wanted to expand on what Tom asked. Are there any promotions or things that we can do different, or beer prices, or things that we can push and promote that would help reduce this gap that we're seeing? I mean, it seems like you're so close that it'd be nice to get over that hump with this somehow.
Yeah, I really believe that Troon Honors has done a fair to good job representing our course in their publications and encouraging other publications. We have some play and stay packages that have been developed with Portofino and a couple of the hotels over on the beach. So I think that there's a good job being promoted, but I think the really important thing right now is the learned behavior of the golfing public in the community, that when golfers establish a routine of going to a particular course, they have a tendency to hold true on it. And that's the trouble with Tiger Point. Up to this point, it has been so inconsistently maintained that golfers chose to go elsewhere. They established those patterns of going elsewhere, and it was harder to bring them back. They're coming back now, and they're establishing those patterns, and I think you're going to see a marked improvement over the next 2 years in the play.
I just did want to share with the council, when you look at the 21 budget, that was,
Oh,
you have
sorry.
it up there.
This, yes.
Yeah, the math is, we're better off than what the bottom line looks like on that.
Yes.
It's just doesn't matter.
Yes. And So at the end of this year, when we do our final reconciling, there will be a due to, due from that is booked to South Santa Rosa Utility, just as it has been in recent years past. And that's because the South Santa Rosa Utility no longer has the cash flow to subsidize the golf course. And so once that is done, it shows up as an accrual year after year in your audit, and ultimately that is a debt that needs to be repaid to the general fund. And that's another reason why, the council has go in the direction of selling the course, because you're now at that crossroads where the capital savings from expanding the existing plant versus building a second plant is a wash. You have invested all of that savings that would have been realized between the difference of those two capital projects in revitalizing the east and west course for the sake of those 15 homeowners associations. After this, if you continue to spend funds, you're then eating into the revenue savings and that annual operating savings that you projected over the next 20 years. And so that's also very significant. It isn't, as Mayor Fitch was talking about earlier, it's not just that upfront capital cost, but it's what it's going to cost you. And the city looked at, well, what is it going to cost to run two different plants when you have two different crews, treatment plant operators, the utilities and so forth. And so just understand that when we're talking with customers, all of the savings that would have been realized from the capital difference has now been reinvested into that property for the benefit of our customers that are represented by those 15 different HOAs. And so from here on out, it's just talking, it is still, and you'll hear me always say it was a very sound business decision to make, because by expanding the wastewater treatment plant where it is, we're still saving ourselves half the cost of what it would be to operate two different plants. So that's,
I think that needs to be part of the study.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Well, I had one other quick question. Is there a carrot for Troon if we ever get into the black on this?
If we go and get,
If we get into the black financially?
Once
Yes,
they
there
get
is.
yeah.
Okay.
their contract calls for them to get an escalating percentage of the
Okay.
profits.
Perfect.
And allow me to say that I know you guys recognize my enthusiasm for that golf course, and for the improvements that are taking place, but let me say that course is a diamond now. It's much easier to sell that course now in the condition it's in with the investments that you have made in it than it would have been at any time in the past. It's a better value for the dollar.
Well, and that is good to know.
Only didn't know that Randy made it to the meeting.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
The record report. Right.
Okay.
And with that, we're ready to adjourn, and then I think Senator Broxton will be here.
Any public forum?
The public forum.
Leslie's.
Do we have any public forum, Ed? Can you see on your side? No. Okay. All right.
All right, we did just check for public forum to see if we had any comments, questions from viewers, and we do not. So at this time, with no further business, we'll adjourn our budget meeting.